Hi, and welcome to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. I'm Diane Hullett, and today I'm here with special guest Kate Hoepke. Kate is the executive director of San Francisco Village, and she's board chair of the Village Movement in California. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Diane. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited too, because I first heard about the Village Movement when I had someone in one of my best 3 months classes talk about being part of a village. And I was like, wait, tell me more. What is this village? So I was intrigued and I reached out to that participant and she put me in touch with Kate. Tell us what is the Village Movement?
Well, nationally, there are about 300 villages around the country. About 20 years ago, it started in Boston, but it's changed a lot since then. It's basically, villages are intentional communities of people over the age of 60 who come together to create a sense of community and belonging, to provide access to resources, to get the support that they need to live independently in the homes that they love, to have a sense of purpose and meaning as they get older. You know, we're social animals as human beings, and as we get older, our social networks diminish, especially after we leave the workforce. And, you know, as we all know, people move to other places to be closer to their kids, or they get a diagnosis that, you know, it impairs them to some degree. People die. There's a lot of reasons why our social networks get smaller.
Right.
And yeah, and that can result in a sense of isolation and loneliness that is detrimental to our health and our well-being.
I think it's huge. So what I love about this is a village isn't a place. I mean, a village is you live in your own home, but you're part of this village community.
Correct. That's right. And so the notion of aging in community, that's what it's called in the aging services world. The truth is that 90% of Americans report that they want to do that. They want to age in their own home. They don't want to move to assisted living. They don't want to go to a nursing home. They don't want to move in with their kids. They want to remain independent and in charge of their own lives.
Makes sense. That's kind of what I want. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we've really shifted. I mean, maybe, I don't know what the number would be, 50, 100 years ago, maybe your village was more naturally created by where you grew up and staying there and extended cousins and family and so on. But now it's just a different time.
Very much. That's very true. And, you know, here in San Francisco, most of us came from other places.
Right.
And at the time we were making those choices in our 20s or 30s, we didn't realize that what we were leaving behind was a natural support network.
What drew you to this? How did you get involved?
Yeah, well, I've been the executive director of San Francisco Village for 10 years. And when I became a mother at the age of 27, I became really interested in human development. And so I became a student of human development and community building. That led me to study community building. And when I was a young mom, I discovered something called a mother's club. And it was an intentional community of young moms who all felt a need to reflect with one another, to be with one another, to learn together. And it built our confidence and it built our sense of efficacy in the world. And so I went on to start 40 mothers clubs in the San Francisco Bay Area, which have served close to 2 million families in the last year.
That's incredible. And so true, because being a young mother can be so isolating, right? And we somehow have these weird fantasies like, oh, you know, my partner's going to show up 100% and we're both going to have jobs and we're going to care for our child and it's going to be fabulous. And instead it can be incredibly isolating. So to create communities for moms, that's fantastic.
And it was, you know, then the ripple effect was we were creating community for the dads too, and for
Absolutely.
the kids too, and for the extended family too, because when mom's happy, everybody's happy.
That's right. That's right.
And yeah, you know, that interesting about the developmental things that happen to us as human beings developmentally, isolation during big transitions is so common. And of course, I didn't know that. I thought it was just me. because I was far away from my extended family and all these other circumstances. But the fact was that it was developmental, which is why the Mothers Club all those clubs that I started were so successful. It just spoke to a need.
It spoke to a need. People were hungry for it.
Exactly. So then, long story short, I got involved in the aging services field. And about 10 years ago, in my early 50s, I decided to go back to school and I got an MBA. And I had all this, I had all this community building training, which is very right brain, it's conceptual and it's communications and it's all this stuff. And I had no left brain training for like, how do you manifest these
The
good
budget, the finances, pay for staff, fundraise, all the stuff that makes something go.
Exactly. So I graduated with my MBA when I was 55. And about 6 months later, I took this job at San Francisco Village. And it really felt like a homecoming to me, that I was back in community building, only it was for a different age level than what I had done previously. And it has been it's been the most rewarding work of my life because I get to bring my whole self. All the things that I've learned both academically, but also interpersonally and intrapersonally, that knowing myself at this age. And I would describe myself as a humanist. I operate on humanistic values, and those would be pro-social behaviors, like reciprocity, giving and taking, mutuality, being there for each other, interdependence, volunteerism. So all these things were present in the village model. It was like, oh, I want to make that succeed.
Right.
So
right, like this fits me, and I can now bring my new MBA and personal skills to this. Right. So tell us about this San Francisco Village as a model, as an example of what a village can be.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think it's a great model. San Francisco Village is a community of about 700 people right now. We're 13 years old, and we started with a group of about 10 or 12, so we've grown considerably. And we have 450 older adult members. We have about 250 multi-generational volunteers. And these young people step up to help their older neighbors for a lot of reasons. But I would say deeply rooted is the need that younger people have for elders in their lives. And many of us have moved here from other places for a lot of reasons in our culture today. We're disconnected. Some of the people that I study would say that we're experiencing a crisis of connection in this country right now. And how do we repair that? So we get together and intentionally connect older adults to older adults, older adults to younger adults in various ways. So a village, basically, I think of it as a three-legged stool. First, we have this wonderful volunteer corps that helps our members accomplish tasks that they need help with. It could be grocery shopping during the pandemic. It could be a ride to a medical appointment. It could be learning how to use Zoom. It could, a variety of things that they might be afraid to ask for help with, but because they belong to a trusted community, they feel confident to say, could I get some help with this?
Fabulous. I love that. So yeah, just it's like these are people who are still capable of living alone, but they need that extra support.
Absolutely. And in our individualistic society, we've made it really difficult to ask for help. I mean, most Americans would say, oh no, I don't need any help.
Right. I've got this.
Right. Because that would mean being vulnerable, and that would mean, feeling like I don't have everything handled. We have to change that. We have to change that narrative.
Yeah.
If we're going to, survive these crises that we find ourselves in the middle of.
And I love this also sounds like it's, it's not prescribed. It's like, well, what do you need help with? I mean, it's very individual, and I'm sure it changes for people. Somebody who's been in your village for 5 years might have very different needs at 75 than they had at 70 or.
And the beauty of the village model is that it's kind of like a karma bank. So in the beginning, somebody might join and they're healthy and well and everything's going along fine. They themselves volunteer to help other people that have needs. Then they feel as though they have an investment. They've made a contribution. They've been a giver in the reciprocity chain, you know? So then
Gorgeous.
5 years down the line, when things change for them, they can say, all right, I'm okay asking for some help because I've been on the other end of this.
Right. They have a surgery, they have a medical event, they have a car accident, and they can ask and feel good in that asking because of the giving.
Right. So that's one leg of the three-legged stool is the volunteer core. And the other leg is a proactive educational and social program. At San Francisco Village, we offer like 50 different opportunities a month for people to gather together, either in casual conversation or a lecture format where they're learning something, or a workshop format. Or now, of course, during the pandemic, we've had to pivot and everything is online now on Zoom. But that's been, you know, people have made the adjustment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they've learned how to use Zoom, and now they're saying, well, thank goodness this is here, because how else would we stay connected? In the beginning of the pandemic, I would say that mostly what we were doing was connecting young people with old people to teach them how to use Zoom, and then how to order groceries online, and then how to get other supplies delivered to them. And then we were connecting younger people with older people in friendly conversation. So that they had something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of examples of that. And then the third leg of the stool is that we provide professional resource and referral to older people who need support and guidance that we can't provide. They might need a referral to an estate attorney, or to, you know, a death doula, or to any number of professions, home care after a surgery, those kinds of things. So we keep our people plugged in, and so they're
To
able
each other and to the external world, both. And so in this, you have some staff.
Yeah, so we have a community of 700 people. We have 5 staff, and we are a lean machine. But what also makes San Francisco Village a model is that 10 years ago, we succeeded in getting funding from our Department of Aging in San Francisco. And that dollar amount has increased over the years. But because of that investment, we've been able to hire professional people. We've been able to rent an office space and a meeting space. We've professionalized to the degree that we are sustainable. I think that a lot of the villages across the country have started in earnest, you know, good faith, a group of, you know, 10 or 15 people around somebody's kitchen table. And then they're all volunteers. And as they grow, there's a need to professionalize in a way, because in effect, you're starting a social enterprise, which is another word for a business.
Right.
It's a nonprofit business, but it is a social enterprise, and there will be revenue and expense, and there will be, you know, hiring.
An organization and somebody to send the emails and just kind of the tracking. I mean, when you say you have 50 events a month, even if it was somewhere much smaller and they had 10 events a month, somebody has to organize those events. And at some point, it's kind of beyond the scope of volunteers.
That's right. And I believe in the grassroots origins of the village movement. I think that that kind of camaraderie and investment of people is amazing. It's proven itself as you know, transformative in a way. But I also believe, as somebody who's been running a village for 10 years, that there comes a time when we need to, you know, move beyond those grassroots origins and advance into a more professionalized business model for the purpose of sustainability. I want this village to be here for my kids or my grandkids. You know, I'm not doing this, you know, just for right now.
Right. So how to lay the tracks down so that it can continue. Is it do people pay? Do the older generation pay to be a part of it?
Yeah, most villages are a membership model. And there are, you know, it's an upside and a downside to that. Membership models can feel exclusive, and that it should not exclude people, but it has in the past. And yet it's an important source of revenue, but it's also an important source of commitment.
Yeah.
If somebody pays something, then they're in. And you can't really, I mean, a village is different because of its, it's built on trust and it's built on long-term relationship. So if you don't have that kind of investment, I don't think it's going to succeed. But we recognized in San Francisco, our board of directors about 4 or 5 years ago, that we needed to go to a sliding scale membership fee to include everybody. So we now have that. And the sliding scale is, if you can afford it, it's $50 a month. If you can't afford that, you can pay 25. And if you can't afford that, you can pay 10. And right now, 50% of our 450 members pay a reduced fee. And we're fine with that, because it's just put a little bit more pressure on me to go raise the money someplace else.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do that because of the inclusivity that's been created by that sliding scale membership fee.
And the growth. Yeah. Do you talk a little bit, if you will, Kate, about, you said you're also the board chair of Village Movement California, if I have that name correct.
Yeah.
How does this, so San Francisco's a model, there are others in the Bay Area that are a little bit smaller, and then how does this extend across the whole state?
Right. So about 6 years ago, we were in relationship with a funder here in California, and we had some serious conversations about the future of the Village Movement and its sustainability. He was just as concerned about that as we were. And so he encouraged us to create a statewide coalition. At the same time, another village here in the Bay Area, it's called Ashby Village. It's located in the East Bay, Berkeley and Oakland and Richmond. We got together and we hired some grad students at the Haas Business School at UC Berkeley to investigate this question of sustainability for us. What was it going to take? And they came back and said basically two things. One is, neither one of you is big enough. You need a coalition. You need a lot of people so that you can get the attention of the big money. Big money is a way of thinking about government and business. They both have the capacity for, foundations and individual fundraising is a rough road. And so they came back and they said, your most likely collaborators are going to be government and the healthcare industry, but they won't be interested in talking to you at that level until you have some scale. You need some numbers. So we set out to create a coalition of villages in California. And we launched Village Movement California in 2018. We have 45 villages in California that are part of our coalition. We did some initial work around, building up that sense of cohesion and togetherness. And then in, I think it was 2020, our new governor, Gavin Newsom, came out with what he's calling a master plan for aging.
Wow.
In response to the demographic reality that the number of people over the age of 65 is going to be double by 2030. And we don't have public policy to deal with that. And so, especially for the moderate and middle income Californians, if you are low income in California, there are many services available to you, including Medi-Cal and some other social support services. But for moderate to middle income, which we estimate to be about 40% of the older adult population, there's very little. So we advocated for ourselves and got ourselves included in the master plan for aging. So now there is an objective within the master plan that is asking us to adapt and replicate the model in California's diverse communities. So that has challenged our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is beautiful because we need that kind of development. And so we just recently, and in February, we made our first budget request of the California legislature to support our work in building new villages, establishing new villages, and supporting the ones that exist. And getting current villages connected to their own local governments.
Yes.
So that those kind of funds can come to them. So it is a long-term project,
It is
Diane.
a long-term project, and it's a big animal. Like I can feel that it's got a lot of legs and it's a lot of possibility, which
Yeah.
if it can really come to fruition, this master plan for aging with the state, I mean, I'm just struck by, again, the power of like how many people say they want to age in place, or I love this age in community. And yet, what is the reality of that? How do you really make that happen? You said an interesting statistic when we were talking before we started recording. You said that 40% of people in San Francisco live alone,
Yeah,
and that it's similar nationwide. That's just an enormous number of people who, in order to successfully age in place, stay in their home that they love, and perhaps that's paid for, or perhaps they rent at a reasonable cost, that is going to be an astounding need for creating community to weave a web that keeps people in place.
exactly. That's exactly right. And if we were to rely solely on government to get it done, it's not going to happen. They have the mandate for services supporting older adults is enormous. And especially when you consider those that are the most vulnerable, the lowest income. I mean, it makes total sense that resources go to support the most vulnerable among us. And there doesn't ever seem to be enough left over. And so we're asking for a relatively small investment that is into a very people-powered movement. Village Movement California, we estimate that we represent about 10,000 older adult members, volunteers, and family members across the state of California. That's significant, but it should be hundreds of thousands, knowing what the population actually is. So we need to do a lot of work. We know that we have to do a lot of communications work. We have to do a lot of advocacy work. Just locally at San Francisco Village, we're amazed at the number of people that when they find out about us, they say, I'd never heard of you before. How come I've never heard of you before?
Right. So the marketing and the advertising and the getting the word out there, it's so interesting what it takes.
Right. Exactly. We're trying to shift consciousness. That is no small job.
That is no small feat, and trying to shift it at a time when so many people are moving into this aging population.
Right.
I think it's so interesting too, how sometimes like like there's common sense, and then there's, well, we have to have the numbers behind it to justify the common sense solution, right? And so I'm sure you're doing an enormous amount of data collection and kind of the research that will then back the funding so that these kinds of things can come together in this, what I would say almost like a private public partnership, right?
Yeah.
Is what this is at its best.
Yeah, I agree with you. At its best, it's a public-private partnership. And I also agree with you that decision makers at the government and business level are only data-driven. So the stories that we can tell, the anecdotes that illustrate what we do, they're not interested. They want to see hard numbers. And so we've been hard at work over the last couple of years also developing the data platform that we're going to be able to deliver those numbers. So we're close, we're almost there.
Well, thank goodness for Kate and people like Kate who decide to get an MBA at 55. And therefore you've got the, the ability and the smarts to pull this together. I appreciate your time so much today, Kate. Is there anything you'd want to say as a last word about the village work?
I don't think so. Your questions have been terrific. And it's always a pleasure to be able to speak about what I love. And, I have a million stories I'd love to tell you, but we don't have time for that. But just suffice it to say that people are in better situations in their later years when they're connected with others and when they know that they belong to something bigger than themselves, and they know that they matter and they have something to contribute. Too often, older people are written off, and they are an ongoing resource to our communities and to young people. My experience with younger people in the last several years has been how hungry they are for eldership. And too often we look to our own families for that, and it doesn't suffice because our families may be far away. There might be broken connections within families. There's a lot of reasons that's too limiting. So I have this vision of connecting the generations outside of our families, so that we can find that, that connection that we need, with olders and youngers. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kate. I love the part you just said too about, like, we know intellectually that it's good to be connected. We've got those words, but what something like the Village Movement is doing is actually creating a platform for it to really happen, so that it isn't just like, oh, I should be connected, but I don't really feel like it. It's like, well, here's the structure in which to actually thrive.
That's exactly right, Diane. You named it. And that kind of structure is intentionally built.
Yes, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen because you read a book that said you should, or because your son or daughter said, gosh, mom, you really ought to get out and go to the rec center. No.
And that's actually that's foreboding. If you say to me, well, mom, you should change your life, you should go get connected and all that. So it's like, where do I begin?
Right.
And so that's why having an infrastructure, we call it an infrastructure for social care.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've built that, people can just plug in. Now, then once they plug in, it's a very creative endeavor. They can participate however they want. They can create, they can absorb, they can do, it's up to them. But the structure is so important. It's like the Mothers Club I was talking about.
Yes, yes. You created a structure that people could then plug into and get those communal needs that we all need.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Kate, for your leadership and your time. And I can't wait to check in. I mean, I would love to hear in a couple of years what's happening and how this is moving. As we said, this is a big animal and a slow animal. When you start talking about the state of California, that is no small feat. And I can't wait to hear how this is moving at a national level too. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Diane.
Thanks for listening to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. I've been speaking today with Kate Hoepke. Kate is the executive director of San Francisco Village and the board chair of Village Movement California. You can find out more about both of those at their websites, sfvillage.org and villagemovementcalifornia.org. You can find out more about Best Life, Best Death at my website, bestlifebestdeath.com. Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.